Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome. This is episode 67 of We All Have Stuff, and we have a wonderful guest this morning. This is our friend Keith. So, hi, Keith. Give him a good welcome.
Yeah, good morning.
Um, Hi. We have a really awesome topic today. Keith does a lot of work in the burnout space and, restoration of the self after some really hard things in life. So, would you mind telling us a little bit more specifically what your passion is and what your work is all about?
Well, uh, my passion has changed from depending where I was, what stage of life I was in.
Hmm.
But currently, um, I have written a book, and which addresses trauma throughout the different effects, different times in my life, and the impacts, and uh, and then how I dealt with that after several decades, actually, of living with it.
Wow.
I
Okay.
I have a quick question. Sorry, Gabby, I'm gonna interrupt you. When
Yeah.
you say and again, share as much or as little as you want, because sometimes on this podcast we will ask like depth questions. When you said like the trauma you've been through, how would you describe that to our listeners? So maybe people listening that could connect and relate to you can know kind of what they can take from this.
Well, so my background as a kid, I always grew up. I was going to be a Methodist minister, and in fact, I would play preacher, and I would talk to my congregation, my imaginary congregation, as they sat on the stairway that led to the upstairs of our house. And you know, sometimes I'd have to call some of those people out a little bit because they might be talking and they had to settle down while I was preaching. But as I was a senior in high school and my dad died, my dad was a railroader and he is a very strong man, been a railroader his entire life. Uh, but at 52 years old, he had a stroke and he died.
Wow.
And my reaction to that was total rebellion. Uh, not just my family, friends, school, goals, passions, but total rebellion to God. I blame God for everything. And so as soon as uh, that acting up, and I finally got through high school, when I graduated, I enlisted into the Marine Corps. And so at that time, of course, the Vietnam War was going on. And so being, the intellect that I was, I said, "Oh, great, that's good. That's what I want. Give me more and more war." And, and, uh, and they did.
Sure.
But the of course, I went to Vietnam, after boot camp and all that. And I was a machine gunner. After there, several months, and then I got wounded for the first time. And shortly after that, after I went back then to duty again, after some time off in the ship hospital, I got wounded again.
Wow.
And then I was on some sort of light duty or something out of combat, but still with the same unit. Then I went back, and about a month later, uh, we were ambushed, and I was riding on the side of the tank and got a pretty good wound in my foot and leg. And so I was then medevac back to the United States, was in the hospital for several months. And
Wow. Wow.
after that, I went back to duty as a Marine Corps. And our duty was to notify next of kin that their loved one had been killed or wounded in action.
Wow.
And so, where in Vietnam, I had wounds that you couldn't see from the trauma, but I also had wounds that you could see.
Sure.
And then as a notifying next of kin, create a lot of more wounds that weren't
Yeah.
visible. And my reaction to that uh, was alcohol. And so I spent a lot of nights in the bars uh, after that. And besides notifying the next of kin, then we were the honor guard for that fallen Marine, which is honorable duty, but it just took its toll. And my last year of doing that, I received a call from my brother, said my mother was dying and probably wouldn't make it through the night. And so my mother had cancer and I knew she was dying, but just didn't know when, of course.
Mhm.
And and she had asked me if I would be the guardian for my younger brother and sister if she passed away before they graduated from high school. Of course, I said I would, uh, like I knew how. But um, so after her funeral, then I went back to duty and I applied for discharge from the Marines to be their guardian. And I became the guardian of my younger brother and sister, who were, I think, 11 and 13. I was 23. I wasn't that much older. I wasn't much more a kid than they were.
Sure.
And, and so that was more stuff. and and then, of course, I had to go to college, but I needed money to do that. So I started working, and I got a job in a factory. Wasn't there too long, as uh, they fired me.
Wow.
And so I got a job in another factory, and by this time I had wised up, so I quit before they were able to fire me.
Oh.
Strategy.
Uh, uh, but I did get in. I did get into college. Had uh, had to work. I worked every day, so most of the time I was going part time to college. Sometimes I'd go full time and work a night shift or something. But mostly through college, I was doing income taxes during tax season. Then I'd do odd jobs otherwise outside of tax season. But so I majored in accounting because I liked the income taxes. And so after finally graduating, took several years, but I did it. I became a CPA. Um,
Wow.
and then the whole time I had my own business, but I was working also for other companies. And finally, I just went, full time on my own.
Mhm.
And as time went on, um, that started really stressing me out.
Sure.
One way of saying it, I guess. Um, it just really piled up. I just had the same mentality as I had as in the Marine Corps. It
Mhm.
was, I'm tough. I can do it.
Sure.
I don't need help. Let me, just don't get in my way. I'm moving forward type of thing. The
Sure.
attitude. And
Can I
well,
ask you something? Because
yeah,
that's the
absolutely.
sentence I've been waiting for. So, how would you say, like, that mentality? Because when you said that, especially with your background of everything you said, like, we see a lot of clients in, like, veterans, military, like, that is the mindset, right? Especially for men, and men will come in often, like, in crisis. But even when you're working with me and Gabby, when we're working with clients, there's so many men stuck in that cycle of, like, gotta be tough, just gotta suck it up, gotta get over it, like, which is crazy because I consider that a survival mindset. But, like, in the military, you actually are trying to survive, right? When you're in your day-to-day life, we're trying to teach people to live their life and not just be in survival mode. So, how do you think that mindset impacted you? And obviously, you became aware of it at some point, like, "I have this mindset."
It, uh, well, definitely. I mean, it was the same mindset that I had, at 18 years old when I went in the Marines, right? But
Mhm.
um, And it was absolutely, it was survival. Um, and, I mean, I experienced that need to survive on a day-to-day basis when I was in Vietnam. But uh, it's, it's not something that you just turn off and turn on,
Mm.
right? I mean, that was on, and that was on for decades
Sure.
after the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
And so, uh, in my case, as far as realizing that, it 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 was a build-up thing, because at the same time that I had was having with that mindset, I was also having nightmares. I had nightmares from combat. I had nightmares from knocking on somebody's door and, have a young lady come to the door holding a baby and tell her that her husband wasn't coming home. You know, those are tough things. Those are still tough things to even think about,
Sure.
right? But
Yeah.
uh, but in my case, I mean, it just came down to that's all. That's all I can take.
Mhm.
I can't take anymore of this.
See, I think when you're talking about both sides of that role as someone in the military and taking responsibility, like we think of the combat stuff, as civilians. We don't think about all that behind the scenes work that happens with visiting families and having the hard conversations.
Right.
So, for me, I think it's really powerful to hear that even someone who's gone through it at such a young age, being in combat, they still put you in that role to connect with families one on one and still take that responsibility. So, it's so emotional for me to have to picture that, when we just really don't even think about that needing to happen. So, I mean, I appreciate that, you were willing to take that role on too.
The the whole thing, I think, just from the day I stepped on those yellow footprints at Marine Corps boot camp, I'm a tough guy.
Yeah.
That's the mentality, and that has always been the mentality.
Mhm.
So, there's and for you to say that, patients come in to see you,
Mhm.
that is probably the number one big hurdle right there, is that
Yeah.
they're coming in to talk to you.
Sure.
They're able to admit it, that they have an issue.
Mhm.
In my mind, that's how I see
Yeah,
it,
sure.
right? And I mean, I had nightmares I never told my wife about. I never
Sure.
would admit to her that I couldn't keep myself under control.
Sure. Is
Yeah, I
that
think it's I
yeah.
think it's interesting to hear you say that. Like, my heart shattered actually because I'm like, "How could you?" Right? Like, how could you keep yourself under control? At least us knowing how, like, the brain, trauma, PTSD, your nervous system is so impacted by all that stuff. It's like you're trying to convince yourself, "I should be able to control this thing," but it's not something that you can just control. Like, you're so emotionally and physically impacted, and then your body's remembering all this pain that you haven't even processed, but now I'm gonna convince myself, "Let me just get over it."
Well, I think that, uh, I probably a lot of that was just through the Marine Corps training.
Mm.
First thing is, that as far as the Marine Corps training is concerned, you're trained to act as not normal. You're not doing normal activities whatsoever,
Mhm.
right?
Sure.
And so you're trained for that, uh, and it is a boot camp it's very intentional, and you're very discipline oriented, and so it's like, um, once you go through it, or while you're going through it, you know that you're becoming a Marine, and you are a part of the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen. And that's the mentality. And so being a member of that, there's only one thing I can do, and that's to keep pushing. But you don't have to be a Marine to have the similar mentality as that either. You know,
That's true.
right. You when you're in business for yourself, even clergy, overdo everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because they're in a caring environment, but they think they have to do more. They have to do more. Keep on going. It's I think it's similar to what I've been through.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah.
I agree. What I think is very difficult for what you've shared with us in your life is especially being so young, like 18 is so young, right? Like, but as much as like I think a lot of you don't have to be in the military by any means to get those what we would deem as like voices and strategies in your brain.
Well, sure.
The military is like making them ingrain even deeper in your brain. So like that becomes like, okay, I have this mindset. But when you said that, like you're disciplined and you're going through trainings, it's like the opposite of what we do in therapy sessions. We're trying to rewire that and get different things in there. But
Mhm.
military is very much like, let me push this and push this into your brain because we need you to think and be this way to survive. Right. And
Right.
then you're taking that out of the world and being like, other people might think this way, but I also trained for this long of my life to make that so ingrained. And now when I'm out, I have to work against that. Like that's hard.
I agree.
What would you say, now that obviously you're out of the military for some time and now you've had some time to reflect on all of the things that have happened in your life in your youth and how many changes and transitions you've been through? What was the turning point mentally and emotionally for you that you recognized that maybe there was stuff to deal with and there was stuff to work through?
I I don't recall actually. Um, I I did come up to a breaking point, right?
Okay.
But it wasn't like a light on and off,
Sure.
right? So I mean, I knew I was having some issues, and I would ignore them.
Mhm.
And I certainly wouldn't tell anybody. I wouldn't talk to anyone about it. Um, instead, I would push on. The answer I think I had for myself was I got to work harder. I'm just not doing enough. Otherwise, I wouldn't be feeling this way. Uh, and so I would push forward. But I had a point to where I was in my office and it was late at night, and I kept a bottle of scotch down here in the drawer, and yeah, I pulled that out, and uh, I had a glass, but I thought, no, I don't want the glass. I just drank from the bottle and put it back down, and you kind of, if you drink it whiskey kind of like that, you know, you expect something, a feeling, right? But it was not helpful like I expected. So I reached over again and I started to drink again. Um, that time I slammed it back down on the desk, and I remember saying something like, "No, no, I can't do this anymore. I just need help." Um, I cried out to God for help. I begged for forgiveness. I spent quite a bit of time the rest of that night, evening, with my face on the floor, and uh, that particular night didn't heal me, but it did start me on the path of healing. So
Mhm.
I see it as a conversion, but not quite the way St. Paul did. I didn't get knocked off my horse, kind of knocked off my chair, kind of, but
Sure.
but I didn't go blind. I think
Mhm.
just the opposite. I think I started to see better. Mm.
Sure.
I love that story. Like of course I'm emotional when I hear all this stuff. It's what we do, but like just the you painted the picture so clear and I just love that you're like in this moment using your coping because alcohol and drugs are a main coping source when you have that much pain, right? It's like you hear that a lot. And when we had a firefighter on here and he talked about the same thing. Like you know, you're in these crazy situations and you don't know what people struggle with. You go home, you drink. You go home and you drink, you know, to numb the pain. And it's interesting to hear you say, like, I'm reaching for my numbing source and the thing that helps me with pain and that it's not working. You're
Yeah,
like, "It should be doing something at this point. I have this scotch, I have this vision of you drinking the bottle." And then it's like this aha moment, like this thing that's supposed to be helping is not even helping anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
It definitely. Uh, I thought that was my healing power, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, I know you said it wasn't necessarily a total healing, but your eyes opened, right, to some other ways that you can work through things and address pain and the hard stuff. So, it sounds like you turned back to God and spirituality and in the way that was best for you. Did that also make you more open to sharing your story and talking about the hard stuff with others also?
That's very interesting because actually exactly what happened. And
Yeah.
so what I started writing, I wanted to know what 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 happened all these decades, all these years. What what got me to here and and how why did I act the way I did so many years? And um because that whole time I mean, I was very successful CPA. My business was good, uh, and I really, for the most part, I loved what I was doing, and but inside it was just, on the outside, so it looked extremely successful, looked well, but on the inside, it was, you know, turmoil, uh, uh, just like boiling over in a sense, and so I just started writing. I writing to myself pretty much uh, about what happened, when it happened, why did this happen, you know, and and when and then I thought after a while when I was doing that, I thought, wait a minute, I wasn't the only one in Vietnam. I saw other people there, you know, people went through trauma like I did,
Sure.
and then I thought too, the other wars since then, and kids are going into combat, coming home with parts of their body missing, and that all that trauma and the how that would. And I thought, William, it's not even that. There's so much, like you mentioned, the firemen, the EMs, stuff they see, stuff they go through, and and turmoil they have, and there's that's more prevalent than people know. And then it's the same thing. It doesn't even have to be that that type of activity. It could be anything in the home, you know, but marriages, everything and turned upside down and uh, domestic abuse or whatever. I mean, there's so many. Name
Mhm.
it. There's a problem somewhere,
Sure.
right? And
Absolutely.
and so I thought, well, this could help others.
Mhm.
And so what I did, I took my memories, my pain, and my redemption, and I poured this into a fictional Marine that I called Kevin Kaysen. And I actually turned it into a book.
Wow.
And and from that, also part of that book, but I also did it separately too, is a workbook. And so it's a workbook, which is, I don't know if workbook's the right name for it, but it's a path. It's a path that I took uh, to enhance my recovery.
Wow. That's great. I mean, I love hearing that because it really is powerful to acknowledge that there are so many parts to people's pain, right? It's things in childhood, it's things
Oh.
in young adulthood, it's things as you grow up in your career, in your relationships. So, to hear you say, "Hey, I went through some really crazy, hard, traumatic stuff, and that wasn't even all of it," is like, wow, a lot of people don't have that awareness. So I appreciate that, you've taken that and made it accessible to everybody. I mean, us and other
Yeah,
people that we might see. It's powerful.
for sure. And it's needed. And what I like is, I think we're talking about, I said it a little bit ago, but men are struggling. Men struggle more. I'm not going to say more, but in the sense of like those mindsets of, more women will lean on each other and tell each other our problems. Like it's just a more of a female, feminine quality to be like, hey, I'm struggling, right? It's more natural for us, even when we don't
Mhm.
want to. And men do not have that mindset, especially when you're like old school generation, military mindset. It's changing a little bit now in our generation, but men are still struggling with this. And then hearing other men talk is like the movement, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
I like what you mentioned, like that cute moment of like, wait, I wasn't the only one there. Like, I can't be the only one struggling with this. If so
Yeah.
many people go and they're there and we all come home and are just like, okay, we're done now. Like,
Hmm.
no, it's actually we're just beginning because we all have this stuff now to deal with, right? And a lot of men aren't telling their wives or talking about it with other
Yeah.
men because they don't want to seem weak or like they can't handle it. And then internally struggling more instead of being like, oh no, we're all in this and we all are struggling. So I love what your book represents.
I think that the whole thing is right. It's that facade that we have of being tough.
Hmm.
You know, I'm I'm a tough guy. I went into the Marine Corps as a skinny little kid,
No.
uh, but the but they told me I was tough, so I agreed.
Sure.
And it stuck. But meet people, I meet new clients, and whatever what was doing. I, for the most part, I would say probably nobody had a clue
Sure.
that I was going home at night and tossing and turning and waking up at midnight and walking around the house, you
Yeah.
know, and that sort of thing
Sure.
over because just keep it quiet,
Hmm.
keep it to myself. That was the whole problem. And
Right.
I don't want to be weak. But you know what I found out? It- I'm definitely not weak, but there's a lot more strength required to admit it than to keep the mask on.
Oh, I love that. I mean, it is so true, and that's really the bottom line of why it's so hard for people to reach out and take that step for help because I think there's that reconciliation of I have power inside, but I need help to get there. I need help to figure
Yes.
out healing and what my recovery needs compared to other people. So, since you've been there, I know it's easy for us to say just ask for help. But what do you think for especially for men or other people who might relate to some of the things that you've been through, what would you say is a good starting point? Where do you begin on this recovery redemption journey?
But first thing, I think that everybody should know that it's not a weakness to ask for help.
Mhm.
And it's not but if it's certainly not weak to sit here and tell you about what I've been through, right? That's not weakness by any means. And take my word for that. But the thing is that just don't try to go alone. You
Mm.
know, and toughness can keep you going until it can't, until it stops. And so the toughness there, and also the toughness can't heal you.
Right.
It can keep you getting deeper and deeper, but just don't be afraid to step out, because the only thing that stops you from people from stepping out is the fear of what other people will think. But move forward, show your strength, and talk to somebody, be it a therapist, a friend, a loved one, but somebody you can trust.
Oh, I love that so much.
Hmm.
We appreciate that. And before we end, I really want to know, like, can you give us, and we'll link it on our YouTube and for people who listen to the episode, like, what is your book called and like, where can people find it?
So it's Burnout: God's Recovery Plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh, the book, it's a quick read, and it's um, the thing, you can find it on Amazon, of course, and different bookstores. But the best approach would be just go to my website, and there's links there to it, to web,
Yes.
and also the workbook is accessible there as well.
Is
Perfect.
the workbook, is it called the same thing? They go hand in hand?
Yeah, it's similar. It says God's Recovery Plan, the workbook.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Uh, and so the workbook's actually in the book itself, but the
Okay.
book's a 9x6,
Mhm.
and so it's kind of hard to go through.
Sure.
But the workbook is 8.5 by 11.
Okay.
And so it's much easier
Sure.
to use and stuff. And I think I put a little more explanation about the steps in it.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause there's 8 different steps that you follow every day. It helps to build a discipline.
I love that.
Love
And
that too.
each one of the steps is grounded in scripture. So
Nice.
the verses that go with it then go for a week, and then the second week the verses change.
Sure.
And it goes through 12 weeks that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a path that I took. I've been through it several times now.
Yeah.
And every time I go through it, those verses mean something, and I get more from it each time.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I
Um,
love that.
but there's things like, action, prayer, gratitude journal, which I think is so important
So
to
good.
be thankful. See what you're thankful for every day. There's so much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you so much for being on our podcast. You were such a great guest. I wanted to cry like 5 times, so I'm glad I held it together. So,
Yeah, we
and
appreciate
you
your
were
time.
so vulnerable in sharing your story like that. And I know we're like just the hosts and strangers to you, but I know your story will impact a lot of people. I'm excited for people to hear it, and um, you're doing great things. So thank you so much for one, your service, but two, for being vulnerable and opening up to a lot of men who will benefit from hearing your story.
Well, thank you. Thanks both of you for all that you do, and for what you're
Oh,
reaching out, and how
oh, thank
you're helping uh, people like me. So
Oh.
I'm so grateful for that. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Oh, yeah,
We all
thank you.
help each other. We're full circle. You
That's
help us,
right.
we help you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
We love
wonderful.
it.
Well,
Well, next
thank you. We
time, yeah.
appreciate it.
We'll make sure to, put links to your website and everything. So if anyone wants more information or to read your book and work through the steps, they can actually access it. And, if we have any questions, we can pass them along to Keith. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. And to anybody
Bye.
listening, we'll see you next time.
See ya.